Hello, welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verrelli, founder and CEO of Project Purple, and we have an interview coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. Since 2010, we've contributed over $3 million and counting to pancreatic cancer research efforts. We've also allocated over $1 million worth of aid to more than 1,300 patients and families through our patient aid programs. Your monthly or one-time gift can improve patients' lives through research and assistance programs. You can donate now at projectpurple.org. Pancreatic cancer does not rest, and neither will we. Your support is truly appreciated. If you're looking to get involved in one of our events, whether that means joining a run team, participating in a virtual walk-run, group fitness, golf, or anything else you can think of, visit projectpurple.org/events to learn more. Without further ado, let's meet our special guest today on the Project Purple podcast, coming to us all the way. I say all the way because like Bangor, Maine's pretty far for us. And I know when we were catching up, I was like, it's not that far. But now that I think about it, yeah, that's like an 8-hour drive here from us in like the New Haven area. Pancreatic cancer survivor, Alice Frati, welcome to the Project Purple podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So I asked you how you got connected. And I knew we were playing like a little bit to get to know each other before, we hit record here and going over some of the show stuff. I think one of the coolest things, and you come from I say a good friend. She's a good friend of mine. I've known her for many, many years. Christina Parrish, who is actually a guest on the podcast, who does some amazing work up in Maine. She's got a great organization. She's got a great story herself. If you don't know it, go listen to our podcast episode because she's been a guest on our podcast. But I think that the power of this community is so cool. And so that's like I was saying to you, like, during COVID, it kind of shifted and, we were getting people from all over the world, but to get referrals from other survivors to share their journeys is pretty special. So that's how you got to us today. So I'm excited to hear your story firsthand. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to you here in a second. And as I tell all my guests, the microphone is yours and feel free to go where you want to take us talking about how you got to us today here on the Project Purple podcast.
Okay. Well, mine is a different story, to say the least. I wasn't feeling well. I would say probably it was in the year 2019. In 2018, I developed a cough in December, and the cough wasn't going away. I was put on antibiotics. I had asthma. I was doing my inhaler, but it was one of these nagging coughs that just wasn't going anywhere. It was just with me. My husband wanted to have a gastric sleeve surgery done. Mm-hmm. And he tried in Bangor, but there was a lot of red tape. Yeah, you had to see a psychologist. He had to lose 50 pounds. Of course, we felt, well, gosh, if he could lose 50 pounds, he could lose the rest. But, he couldn't do it. His friends from Yuma, Arizona, one of them had the gastric sleeve done in Mexico at this facility. So we had applied to have his surgery done there, and it was a go. We made plans to go in November. I wasn't feeling all that well. And over the course of that year, it was in 2020, I'd lost some weight. I wasn't eating as well as I should have been eating. But we went. And when I got down there, and this was like, when was this? Like 2011, I think it was 11/10 in 2019 that we went down to Yuma. Mm-hmm. I just didn't feel good.
When you say don't feel good, define that because everybody's definition of not feeling well is different, right? Like
Yeah.
for certain people. So I know a lot of times the question comes up with guests, like they just sense something is off. And so I'd love
Yeah.
to hear kind of like, what's your definition of not feeling well? Was it like nausea? Was it
I
just
did
like
have some nausea.
malaise?
I was fatigued.
Hmm.
I had lower back pain. Um, I also had incontinence,
Hmm.
and I had that nagging cough. And also, um, the night before my husband was going to leave for Mexico, and I was supposed to accompany him, I was really dizzy. And I got up to go to the bathroom and I fell. Okay. And he had to help me get up, and he had to help me to the bathroom. And so being off balance like that, that was new. Um, so the next day, and also I wasn't eating well. Food did not appeal to me at all.
So is it the food didn't taste the same, or was it like appetite just wasn't there? Like you just weren't
Appetite
hungry?
was not there.
Yep.
Appetite just was not there.
Like not hungry, like just like you could go a
Yeah.
day and not necessarily be like hangry, as they say sometimes, because you haven't eaten all day.
Yeah. No, it's just the appetite wasn't there, and food didn't look good to me.
Huh.
And so he left in the morning. I was still sleeping. He left in the morning to go down with his friends. Their daughter was at the house. So when I got up, I told her, I said, I don't feel right. I think I need to go to the ER. And so she took me there. And, when I was there, I said that, I didn't feel good. When I left Bangor, I had a urinary tract infection that had been treating me for. And then I had lost some weight. And then I just I guess I collapsed or something, because I don't remember anything after that. So I woke up in a hospital bed, and apparently they did all sorts of tests on me. And the doctor who saw me said, you have pancreatic cancer. Do you understand that? Well, heck no, I didn't understand that. I mean, I was sort of like, well, first of all, I was septic, and I wasn't thinking clearly. And I just said, yes. And he said, okay. And then he left. And I was hooked up to IVs
But
and
you had
everything
passed
else.
out, so you're waking up to the doctor being there saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, Alice, you have pancreatic cancer. Do you
Yeah.
understand?" And okay, like on
Yeah.
he goes.
And, they didn't have on file anything like that I had a husband or anybody to call or anything.
Wow.
And so I was there by myself, other than the other people in the room.
Yeah.
And so I was like really out of it. I slept a lot. I had no idea what the timeline was, like what day it was or anything, from when I had come in to when I had woken up. And then finally, my husband came, and I realized, he was in the hospital down in Mexico. I had no idea, when he'd gotten home or when he felt well enough to come to see me, but he did come to see me. And I told him, and apparently the doctor had told him that I had pancreatic cancer. Um, and so it was a matter of, when would I be able to go home? Yeah. And the thing was that the tumor apparently made a fissure into my bile duct. So this massive, I don't know what you would call it, stuff was coming out of the tumor into the bile duct, plugging it up. So they had to keep going in every few days and put a stent into it so it would clear out.
Yeah.
And so I ended up staying there for 10 days.
Wow.
And each time it was, we're not sure if she can go home today, because it all depends on whether that stent is free, is clean or not. And they were very concerned because they, felt like I needed to go to Boston to be seen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they felt like we were in the Hicks or something in Bangor, that I wouldn't get treatment or something.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I wonder if they wanted to send you to more of a specialized group. I always,
like they wanted me to go to John Hopkins or
like a Mass General or a Dana-Farber,
Yeah. Dana-Farber was one that was mentioned.
Yeah. I know we're really big. I personally, I think you have to go where they deal with pancreatic cancer like day in, day out.
Right.
And I know that's it's interesting because, Maine is it's a big state.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of woods and it's not very populous. So, but there's quality healthcare everywhere in the United States. I think it's just when you really need something really specialized, where unfortunately pancreatic cancer is a real big specialty. I think it does matter that you get to one of these really, really high volume centers that's all they're doing is pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And that even though, Alice, in all fairness, though, we're in Connecticut and there's, 3.5 million people here. And we're so close to Boston, which has, Mass General or Dana-Farber, or
Mm-hmm.
New York, which has Columbia, or, one of the other centers down in the city that are, high volume centers. So, regardless of where you live, and even if we talk to people in the city and we always advocate to go to the high volume center because there's things that are being done there. So I guess it doesn't really matter where you live. I think what I'm trying to say is it's really important, and hopefully for listeners at home too, to find one of these really, really high volume centers. Not to say that you're not going to get it's not like you're not getting high quality care in a communal setting in Bangor and in Connecticut here. But in terms of high volume, you really want to go to a center. But the tide is turning a little bit, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because I think in some locations geographically, especially in New England, and this may be the case in Maine too as well. I just unfortunately don't know a lot about the healthcare system up there, but I know here in Connecticut, we are starting to see high volume centers appear here in the state of Connecticut, with this expertise in pancreatic cancer, like a Hartford Healthcare, that has expertise that we could put up pound for pound with some of these other high volume centers that I've already mentioned. So I think the tide's turning a little bit for a lot of people, which is good,
Mm-hmm.
because now you don't have to necessarily drive 8 hours to get high quality of care.
Right.
So
they
I'm just
finally did let me go home after 10 days.
So this was 10 days, just timeline. So you pass out. So
Mm-hmm.
you were in the hospital for 10 days from that first episode to when you were going home.
So it was November 13th through November 22nd.
Okay.
And so I ended up getting home. And I wasn't home very long before I ended up back in the hospital. So I was at Eastern Maine Medical Center in Bangor. And I was septic again. And my stent needed to be cleared. So they didn't have anybody at that hospital that could do stent work. So they ambulanced me down to Portland to their hospital, and I had the stent replaced. Then I ended up back at Eastern Maine, and was there for, a few more days, and then they let me go home. Well, obviously that stent was filling up quickly, because if they had to change it, I think they changed it 4 times during the 10 days that I was in Yuma. So it filled up again. I was back in the hospital, ambulanced me down to Portland again. They put in another stent. I went back. And then I was in the hospital again, filled up, ambulanced me back down to Portland. And that's when I met Dr. Howell. And he was the one that had didn't put in a stent this time. And I was stayed overnight, and he had contacted Dr. Fitzgerald, who was an oncologist surgeon. Now, when I was in Bangor, a surgeon up there said that I was inoperable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had, 6 months to live. So Dr. Howell told me that the type of tumor that I had was an intraductal papillary mucinous neoplasma of the pancreas.
IPMN.
Yeah. And he brought Dr. Fitzpatrick into the picture, much to my not knowing. But Dr. Fitzpatrick came in and saw me the next day, and he says, "Have your ears been burning?" And I said, "No, but I don't know what's going on." And he says, "Well, we're going to save your life." And he said, "We have a team of doctors, and I have gotten together, and we have figured out a plan to make this work. And we've discussed it with your oncologist at Lafayette Cancer Center. And so we've come up with something that we think will work." And he said, "We're going to do radiation first to stop the mucus. Then we're going to do chemo, and then we're going to operate." And I says, "But the doctor told me it was inoperable." And he says, "Well, that's because the pancreas, the tumor has wrapped itself around the vein, the
portal
artery.
vein. Portal vein, yeah.
Yeah." And he says, "But we're going to fix that problem." And I said, "Okay." So they sent me home. And with no stent. Then on a Sunday, Dr. Howell called me and said, "I need you to come down tomorrow, because we figured out how to block that fissure. We're going to put a metal stent in up against it, and that's going to block it. And then you can start radiation." So this occurred all during January. And I went down. I was in and out of the hospital through December and January. So I went down, he put the stent in. And then on February 3rd, I went in and was mapped in radiology. And then I started the radiation. And that went through March 13th. They also had me on a chemo pill during that time period. They said that was supposed to help. It made me very nauseous.
Mm.
And that was a very trying time to go every single day for radiation, except for Saturdays and Sundays. And I was very weak. At that time, when I went into the hospital in Yuma, I weighed 120 pounds. By the time I started radiation, I was down to 104 pounds. Yeah. And I was pretty frail because I had been septic most of the time.
Yeah.
And they actually thought that I wasn't going to make it through radiation, but I did. And they had me hooked up with not hospice, but what's before hospice?
Intensive care?
No.
Were you doing like neoadjuvant or like
Well, I think it was hospice actually.
No, respite.
They had me hooked up with hospice. And but I made it through.
Mhm.
And then they gave me a break. I ended March 13th
with the radiation?
with the radiation. And then I started April 21st on the chemo. So I had a break in between.
So this is like going in, so you're going from 20 to 21 during this time frame. So I just want to pause where we are in the timeline because the other piece here is, so you're at this at the end of 2020. So COVID has started. You're doing all
COVID
this
has started, yeah.
You're doing
And
all this on your own.
This is in 20.
Yeah, so end of
Because I
20.
didn't have surgery until October 2020.
21 or 20?
2020.
Okay. So
I
but
had
this
the radiation.
in 20, I thought you said in March of 2021.
No. That was in 2020 because I was diagnosed in November 2019.
Oh, 20. Okay. All right. So you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. So 2019. I had it as 2020. So 2019, you get this diagnosis. So now you go into 2020. So you start off as in a normal, and then it quickly goes to like by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because in March of 2020 is when everything shut down. So you get
Right.
through radiation like normal, I assume, or maybe in the beginning, or maybe at the very end, I don't know, maybe. And then now you're doing chemo, it's a totally new experience, right? Like I would imagine.
Right. And nobody could come with me.
Correct. So you're on your own.
Yeah.
Wow. So that had to be a little bit kind of, I guess the best way to is like weird. It was really weird, probably,
It was
right?
very strange because,
Yeah. You go
and
from like normalcy of like treatment.
I was keeping track of things, and I was
Yeah.
saying, this whole pandemic thing is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
When this thing's going to get back to normal, because here I was going by myself with an experience that I've never experienced before. And I was like lost.
It's so wild. I mean, I know hindsight's always 2020, and I mean, I think the healthcare system has already probably started to look back on some of the things that they did. I mean, we just didn't know, right? Like nobody knew, and the guidance, like I don't even know. And this is not the podcast to try to decide about that, but it's just fascinating. I mean, we've talked a lot about this on this episode, on this podcast, I should say. I just mentioned this on this podcast, but it's even now, like today, like people are getting diagnosed. It's like totally a totally different experience than those poor people that went through it, which you're part of that cohort, unfortunately, through, March of 2020, the end of March 2020 through like 2021. I feel like for a whole year, like people were just doing chemo by themselves, and getting like these diagnoses by themselves, or doing like, doctors were doing, giving people the awful news via Zoom, like or over the phone, which is like so crazy. Like, how is that like even morally ethical, like to give someone such a dire diagnosis over the phone? It's just wild. Like it's just so foreign, and like I know if we had to do it all over again, I'm sure people would do it a much different way. Not to be as traumatizing as it was for a lot of people during that time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you go into chemo in April, the new norm or whatever that normal is at that point in time becomes
Right.
what it is. And so how long do you do the chemo for?
Well, I not very long because I couldn't tolerate it.
Well,
Um,
if you said you were 104 pounds on radiation, like chemo really takes especially depending
it
on
was
which chemo.
awful.
Yeah, like I'm sure that had to be a big issue just with your weight and just the size.
Yeah.
Like it's just not a positive thing.
No, it was, I was supposed to do 8 sessions of it.
Yep.
And I think I only did 6 sessions.
6 of the 8.
Yeah. I started to lose blood and I kept having to have units of blood and they didn't know why I was losing the blood. So they stopped. They stopped the chemo. And it was really awful. I felt awful on it. I kept losing weight. And I tried to eat, but nothing was really appealing. I was put on Boost. Um,
Which tastes like crap. Let's be honest.
yeah, it does. It
It's
does.
like it's viral stuff. I mean, I get it. It's calories, but it just
I
does
was
not
getting
taste good.
constipated by it.
Yeah.
And it was just, it wasn't working. The whole chemo, I mean, it was helping to decrease the tumor size, but my body couldn't tolerate it. So they stopped it. And I thought, oh gosh, now I can't have the surgery. But Dr. Fitzpatrick said, we're still going on with it, but you need to be able to walk a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, during this whole time, I was at my mom's house. I couldn't be at home because we had stairs and the bathroom was upstairs. So, and my husband came over to my mom's house daily. And, was with me while he was keeping down the hatch at the house and taking care of our cats. And so he started with me, taking me on a walk. And I was like down half the driveway and then down the full driveway and back. And, he gradually got me to be able to go for a mile. So I was really happy about that because that was a part of the criteria.
Did you ever ask why?
I guess I needed to have the strength.
Yeah. That's
Have some
fascinating.
stamina and strength.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not to point out the obvious, at 104 pounds or, in that fragile state. I mean, I know I've heard surgeons like balk at people that were overweight, right? Like people that were, and a lot of times that comes to like, from a heart issue, like just being, able to withstand kind of some of the rigors of a Whipple or, whatever procedure's done down in the pancreas. But that's the first time I've heard of someone, a doctor saying, well, you got to have, certain stamina.
Yeah.
Which is great, but it is it does make sense though. You think about it, and I know that's not a subject that we talk about often, in terms of, having the stamina in order to go through the treatment. So, I think it's positive. I mean, I know we've talked to a lot of survivors about physical fitness and what that looks like during treatment and trying to keep up with things. To your point, like even, it's not like going to the gym every day and putting up a bunch of weights or doing, yoga classes. It's just being able to go to the mailbox and get the mail and come back and not feel winded. As you know, the treatments like just beats you up. And so to keep that, maintain, I should say, that stamina is really important. So it's just interesting hearing that because we've never heard that on the podcast.
Well, I had physical therapy too before.
Yeah.
And that was like, trying to strengthen my abdomen and, shoulder strength and my knees, that kind of thing. But I tell you, when I was in the hospital waiting for the stent to go down to have the stents done, they would tell me, okay, you can't eat. Yeah. You're going down the next morning. Yeah. But then it would be canceled.
So you didn't eat.
They were going to do it the next day. So I couldn't eat. And this
Correct.
would go on sometimes 3 days of absolutely no eating. And, what a way to lose weight.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we don't talk enough about, and how these changes in the system, that's a systemic issue with the system. And that just doesn't happen where you were. I'm sure that happens all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
Where to your point, yeah, like you can't, it's not like you can eat, because if you have to have these procedures, you can't eat because you can't have a full stomach.
Right.
So like if those procedures keep getting bumped and bumped and bumped, yeah, you're sitting there for 3 days not really eating anything other than ice chips.
Yeah.
Not really a way to sustain someone in terms of just like staying strong and staying healthy. That's just not healthy at all.
No nutritional value, and you're losing weight. And they say, well, why are you losing weight? Well, you go
not
3
eating.
days without eating.
Yeah.
Wonder why?
Yeah. So you get through that chemo, they stop at 6, and then do they say, all right, now we're gonna go in and try to get this thing out?
Well, they waited because I ended the chemo in April.
Okay.
I mean, not April, August.
August of 2020.
So they waited until October, I think it was October 10th, I think, is when I had the surgery. So that was October 10th of 2020.
So you have your surgery. So did you have a Whipple?
Yes. And what they did was Robert Hawkins was on that team, Dr. Robert Hawkins, and he was a vascular surgeon.
Yep.
So he took a vein. He took an artery or a vein or something out of my neck.
Yep. So they recreate the portal vein. So they take the whole thing out. Yeah.
They took the whole thing out and then grafted that in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is actually interesting that we're having this conversation, because we were just talking about this the other day. I won't name the system, but so it's fascinating that this happened in 2020. So typically tumors that are wrapped around that portal vein are non-surgical, and most surgeons won't touch them. But what we're starting to see, which is awesome, and there is a business side to this, and I think what systems are finding is that by combining expertise with vascular surgeons, they can do these surgeries that normally they would not touch, because they bring in the vascular surgeon to recreate. Most pancreatic cancer surgeons, and many of them are super talented and very good at what they do, but they have their limitations and they know their limitations. And so vascular reconstruction is not one of their strengths. And so that's really exciting, because I was literally just having this conversation with a major center in the United States, and they said that this is like their standard protocol now. And they're doing like so many of these cases now and giving people the opportunity, right, to eliminate the cancer because of this vascular reconstruction, which is awesome.
I know. I'm so blessed to have these two doctors and the team that worked with them.
Yeah.
To do this, because it's a long operation.
Yeah. It's much more complex because of that reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the surgery. How does recovery go then post?
Well, I came back and I was in, of course, I was in like a critical care.
Yep.
And of course, my sister was the one that came down with me, and she couldn't see me except for 1 hour a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because we're still in 2020, so we're at that tail end. So there's still the restrictions and everything.
So many restrictions. And I was hurting. Oh my gosh. That is a surgery that I wish upon no one.
Yeah.
Whoa, talk about pain. And talk about trying to recover from it. That was horrendous. I got home. I could only sleep in one of those chairs that like go
like
back,
recliner,
those medical chairs.
Yeah.
And then it was just like I had a walker. Unbelievable pain. And I had to have physical therapy. I couldn't lie flat for the longest time. I needed therapy to do that. Needed therapy to get back on my feet. It was unbelievable. And then because I didn't have a pancreas, I was diabetic.
Yeah.
And so I have to take Creon, which is enzymes that your pancreas automatically makes to help you digest food. And if you don't digest food with these enzymes, you're just dumping food and you're not getting any nutrition or anything.
Correct.
So I'm on that for the rest of my life.
Which is very expensive.
Yeah. And I'm also diabetic. So I'm on insulin for the rest of my life, which is very expensive.
Yeah.
These things are not cheap. And so there's a lot of upkeep.
But you're alive.
And
so
go ahead.
No, so this is all, and I just want to make this point. So you come out, good news, they got it, we're able to do everything, but now you have a host of other new things to deal with, diabetes, the Creon, and also just a physical recovery from such a major surgery. Also, given your state beforehand, like you said, you were like 104 pounds. So imagine you probably didn't gain a ton of weight before surgery.
I dropped after surgery. I dropped down to 70 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's probably been an uphill battle. I mean, now fast forward, we're what, 4 years from, 4 years from that surgery. So let me ask you this question here. And I was going to say uphill battle because I know it's not easy. Kind of life changes how you eat and everything else, as you mentioned. But and then you throw in the diabetic piece into there. Did they put you on any post chemotherapy? Any other? They wouldn't do radiation, so no chemo.
No.
You're good. Just get stronger and recuperate from the surgery.
Right. I mean, I had to go in every 3 months and have the blood test done and have the scans done. And every time it's come back clear.
It's awesome.
Dr. Fitzgerald said he got all the cancer out, and so far that's proven true. And I just had to gain weight. When I was considered normal, gaining weight was easy.
Yeah.
Not now. Not now. I am up to 95 pounds now.
Wow.
And it has taken me 4 years to get there. But if I get sick, I will lose pounds.
Yeah.
And I can, getting sick, I don't just get sick. I get sick.
Sick, yeah. Well, your immune system is a lot different. I imagine, through everything you've gone through, but you're here, which is
I'm here.
The most important thing.
True.
That's a pretty amazing story, Alice. Couple questions for you here. And I know this comes up often, and I know you've said you've been doing scans every 3 months. Have they moved you to 6 months yet?
Yes.
Okay. I know there's something that we talk about often, which is the anxiety. Scanxiety, I think, is what most survivors kind of will mention that.
Terrible scanxiety.
So have you found a way to deal with that? Or like, is there a kind of something that kind of like helps you get through that time?
My husband. My husband says it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. So this is a topic that we talk about often. we focus on what we can control here at Project Purple. And I
Right.
think I mentioned, not that I think, I mentioned to you before we hit record, this isn't about us, this podcast, it's about you. But one thing I will say about us is I think for us, everyone's a survivor, regardless of where they are in their journey, because no one can tell someone that, I think it's ignorant for doctors to tell patients that they're not going to make it because they don't know.
Mhm.
But I think like this community is really fixated on numbers. I get it. There's statistics, and I think we all know that. But I also feel that we do a really poor job of celebrating survivors from day one, like people who are alive. And people say, "Well, I'm not a survivor until I reach X or until I'm done with treatment." And I'm like, "Why? Like, why does that matter? Like, you're still here, you're still alive, you're still living. Like, that's surviving." Like, I don't know. Yeah, you have pancreatic cancer, but you're still here, and yeah, you're still alive. So that's one. But number two, like the things that you just mentioned here most recently about the struggle about gaining weight and being a diabetic and now being on Creon, I don't think is a story that we talk about enough. And so I want to kind of maybe spend a couple minutes and talk a little bit about that because yes, you've beaten pancreatic cancer, right? Like clean scans, you're not in treatment, but you're not the person you were before you started this journey, which is
No.
okay, which is okay. That's not a negative, but there's still challenges, in your
Mhm.
life, from the diabetes and then also from the Creon. And I don't think the community as a whole talks enough about that. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So for those, I know you mentioned the Creon. So what's it like? I guess the first question on that, like if you don't take Creon, what happens to you?
Get the room.
Well, I'll get diarrhea.
Yeah.
The food just dumps out of me.
Yeah.
I can get nauseous.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is all foods. This is not just particular foods. It's all the
foods.
food. Yeah.
Foods.
Can't digest them.
And because I can't digest them,
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are days too where I'll take the Creon, but and this will happen. I'll eat. This will be like the same meal that I will eat, but all of a sudden my stomach will go, nope, don't want it, and I'll throw it up.
Yeah.
And it will because my all of a sudden the digestive system says, I don't care. I'm just not going to take it today. And
Yeah.
when you've taken away the gallbladder, you've taken away the bile duct, you take away your pancreas, you take away some of the small intestine, and you replumb it all.
Yeah. There's a whole big plumbing system in there.
It's a different plumbing system.
Yeah.
And your digestive system slows down. And it may be, okay, well, you haven't gone to the bathroom, you haven't had a bowel movement, and you're blocked up in there in your stomach, and your stomach says, nope, don't want it. And you throw up. And then you just don't feel like eating for a while.
Yeah.
And because your stomach just doesn't want any food. So, you end up with such problems like that. And you can't have any fatty foods because you have no gallbladder. So there's some foods you have to stay away from.
Yeah.
And you can't have alcohol.
Yeah. Well, all alcohol, like, and I'm not trying to point fingers here by any means in anyone. So listening or anyone watching, but there's so much scientific data now that alcohol is just bad. Like all forms of alcohol are bad. Just like we know now, I think, but the alcohol industry is a $1 trillion industry. So we worry about what we can control, as I said. I mean, just like cigarettes, right? Like people knew for years and years and years, like if you smoked a pack a day or if you were a consistent smoker, even Christ, secondhand smoke, right? Like we knew that was causing cancers, right? I think eventually the truth from the mainstream will come out about alcohol. I hope.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I think there is a difference though, maybe with maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. Because I don't think like having an occasional drink, but there's some literature out there and data behind that like even having an occasional drink, not from a necessarily from a carcinogenic standpoint, but from a just a inflammation standpoint, which we know all inflammation's bad, like for our body now. Like there's these things that inflame our organs and cause these reactions in our body. Like alcohol is one of them. Like it's an inflammatory like thing that you do, and it's not good, especially for cancers. So I think the more and more that we find out about these things, I think we'll start to realize like how bad these things are. But to get back to your point, though, you have this total reworking, so nothing works the way it did before.
Right.
So have you found, and even now with the diabetes, like you've got to be on top of that, or else there you could have major issues.
Yeah.
Have you found some balance in that though that you could share, or things that you have found that have kind of worked for you, given like the reworking and all these changes from a dietary standpoint and from how you eat and really from a lifestyle standpoint?
Well, I've had to try to figure out how my body responds to sugar
Yeah.
and where that balance is. Like I don't have bread. And I
And
never really did.
sugar's in everything though, Alice, right?
And
Like,
I know it is.
yeah,
And I don't eat the processed foods.
yeah,
But I never really ate bread, you know, as a typical food.
yeah.
Um, I cook a lot, so I eat fresh foods. But I will, I like my Burger King once in a while. I have to say,
The flame broiled.
I just have to. I had to figure out a balance
Yeah,
and figure out what foods would work and what foods wouldn't. But I'm still going to have that upset once in a while.
yeah,
Um, and then I figured out, if my stomach is feeling this way, I'm just going to have some crackers. And I get terrible heartburn. Um,
from the eating.
since the surgery,
Yeah,
yeah, terrible heartburn. So I've had to deal with that. And sometimes I'll be honest. I swear I say to myself, God, what is this all for? Every day is a struggle.
yeah.
And so I wonder, but I keep going.
Well, it's powerful. From the community standpoint, you're an inspiration for us all, to beat this thing. And yeah, life isn't the way it was before, but you're here with us.
Right.
And there's not a lot, statistically it's 13. So you're part of that 13%.
Yeah.
And we've got to keep pushing for better treatments, better detection. And hopefully that number will continue to rise, and you'll be part of that community as we continue to advocate and get better treatments and get people into better places. It may not be the place that they were before, but they're here.
That's right.
And still being able to take advantage of things. I've got a couple questions left for you, and then we're going to share where our audience can connect with you. What would you say to someone, given what you've gone through, would be kind of advice for someone listening or watching that just got diagnosed, given your journey and what you went through? Some, maybe a couple things, or maybe there's one thing that you would really tell this person, like, this is what you should do given your journey.
I think that you need to have somebody advocate for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister had breast cancer. So she had been all the way through this and she knew what to do. So she advocated for me. She was my voice. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So I needed her to talk to the doctors, to make appointments, to find out information for me. I couldn't do it. She was my angel. She took down notes. And if you don't have somebody that can do that for you, you need to find somebody, a friend, somebody that can help you.
And I know we opened the show talking about, Chris, who does so many, Christina, that does so many things. I call her Chris, but it's Christina up in Maine, that has a group. And I think what you're saying is so impactful and so powerful here. Alice, I mean, not everybody has family, and it's great when family steps up. And it's awesome to hear that your sister was that person. But if you don't, there's so many great groups. And that's why go back to Chris here. Like when we started Project Purple, and I think Chris was started right around the same time, 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
There weren't that many groups, but now, there's over 50 groups, here in North America alone. Many of them have resources, to support patients if they don't have a big network or don't have a sister or don't have someone that could be that person. There's even groups that have mentor programs, where there are people that have gone through that journey that can mentor, patients through that journey, if that's what they need. But your point about having support and advocacy is really, really critical, and something that we see often of people who have very positive outcomes, in those journeys because they have a support system. And sometimes the support system is one person. Sometimes it's a group of people or neighbors, and everyone kind of plays a role, in that. And doesn't mean that if you don't have 9 people helping you out, that your journey is going to be any different. Just maybe 1 or 2 people, and that's all you need. And but no one should fight alone. And there are groups out there, and there are people willing to help people get through this journey. That's what's great about this country. I mean, it's a really weird time that we're in politically and socially. And I think if you stayed up and watched certain news cycles, you'd probably think like everybody's like, and no one's there to help. I always say, just look at like the charitable space, look at like cancer groups, or look at like go to like we're big runners, so like go to a marathon and just see like humanity, like how someone's trying to run 26 miles and they collapse like 800 meters to go, and like these random strangers like pick these people up and like carry them over the finish line. Same thing with cancer, right? Like someone's going through that fight, and you'd be surprised like who steps up, and people are there to help people, like random strangers. So it's so powerful that you say that, because I do believe like that no one should ever fight cancer alone.
No, never.
Last question here. And this is I say our loaded question. Most of my questions are loaded, but they kind of have a reason why we ask them. But this one loaded in the sense that it's a thought-provoking one. There's no right or wrong to it. It's given what you've gone through, how you've experienced pancreatic cancer with your journey. How do you define it? Like, what's your definition of pancreatic cancer for what you've gone through?
It's a cancer that I would hope no one would go through. It's terrible. It's evil.
Evil.
Thank you for sharing that, Alice. That's pretty powerful and a term that I often use, but I'm going to leave you with this. You beat it, and
It did.
you'll continue to beat it, and it doesn't define you of who you are. For our audience watching and listening, if someone out there may be recently diagnosed and wants to talk to you about your journey, your surgery, maybe get referrals, where can our audience connect with you, Alice?
A Frati at roadrunner.com.
And Frati is Frati
Yes.
at roadrunner.com. So it's A Frati at roadrunner.com.
That's correct.
Awesome. Alice, thank you for being a guest on the Project Purple podcast and allowing us to share your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like today's episode, feel free to share this episode and make sure to follow the Project Purple podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. That's a wrap of another episode. Thanks for listening. And until next time, please be safe.